possible to bodybuild with doing only calisthenics? You made a monster. Good evening, YouTube. Welcome to another video. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like, subscribe, turn notifications on, all the good stuff. Just a quick update. As you can see, I still got this thing on. I've got about 5 more weeks of wearing this thing before I find out if the surgery was, held successfully. So fingers crossed there. But so far so good. Weight-wise, I've came back only about 3 pounds that I lost. I'm hovering close to about 170, and it's really hard right now because I'm eating about 1,000 more calories a day than I was eating before, and still not gaining any weight. Apparently, when you have major surgery with a major injury and your body's trying to fix itself, it burns a lot of calories. Who would have thought? I have an article I want to go over today. It came across my feed a few days ago, and it was interesting. I read the article, and there's some things I agree with, some things I disagree with, and some points that I think he gets way off the mark. So we're going to go through it and then give my feedback afterwards. Alright, so you can see this is kind of a poorly named website because they call it Project Calisthenics. It's not related to the Project Calisthenics program from Simon Atta that I have been using or was using prior to my injury. It's actually, this is like a 16-year-old kid who was able to claim this domain name. But the article is it possible to be a bodybuilder doing only calisthenics? So let's see what he has to say. If you're new to and want to be a bodybuilder, you'll most likely be looking for the most effective way to train for size, looking for hypertrophy. The go-to for many people would simply to join a gym and start lifting weights. While this certainly is a viable method, there are other ways to grow lots of muscle. It's true. That being the case, allow me to talk about calisthenics and if it's possible to be a bodybuilder doing only calisthenics. I'll only talk about if it's possible, but I also go into detail the key differences between calisthenics and traditional training or traditional bodybuilding exercises so that you can choose what to do for yourself. Let's get into this. The main difference between calisthenics athlete and a bodybuilder. Notice that he said calisthenics athlete here, not just somebody who's doing calisthenics, but we'll get to that in a second. In terms of training, calisthenics is very different from bodybuilding. That is wrong. But let's see what he has to say, and then I'll give my thoughts on it. First and foremost, calisthenics does not involve the use of weights and or form of resistance or additional resistance for the most part. Because of this, calisthenics mainly involves around bodyweight movements. On the other hand, traditional bodybuilding training session will almost always involve lifting weights. This might include movements like bench press, deadlift, weighted pull-ups. While the movements and exercise may be different, the main difference has nothing to do with the training methods, but rather the training principles. In this case, bodybuilding almost always requires some form of progressive overload. This progressive overload is repeated and additional or added intensity to the workout and is done so that the muscles can continuously grow without becoming resistant to the workout. Since calisthenics offers no additional resistance, you will be left with far fewer ways to achieve this. That is entirely wrong. Those 4 paragraphs right there are all wrong. So let's go through it and break it down. Calisthenics doesn't necessarily have to deal with weights. If you're doing pure calisthenics, in other words, if you're only doing body weight exercises, you're correct. You're not going to be adding weights. However, there is weighted calisthenics, and most people will do weighted calisthenics in some form. For example, pull-ups. Once you're able to do about 20 to 30 pull-ups with your body weight, it's silly to continue to try and add more. You're just increasing your muscular endurance at that point. To add strength, you have to add weight. So people would add weight vest, a weight belt, and start adding plates to it. And that will increase your pulling strength. That gets to your progressive overload. You want to do heavier weights consistently in your workouts. You want to do more pull-ups than last time. You want to do heavier weight, more weights on your pull-ups than last time. The other idea behind where he says that progressive overload is not what you're looking for in calisthenics is also entirely wrong, because the entire purpose about progressing and increasing your movements is to progressively overload. with calisthenics, there's more ways to progressively overload than in traditional weight training. What do I mean by that? So with calisthenics, one of the main things that you're doing is trying to learn skills. Things like the planche, or the front lever, the back lever. These are not things that you can just go up and do. Like you're not going to, first day in the gym, you're not going to walk up and just do a front lever and be able to hold it for a few seconds. It's not going to happen. You have to progressively get there. You have to overload your workout. So you're going to be doing different front lever, different exercises, like maybe the ice cream maker, pull-ups, chin-ups, things to help you build the foundation so that you can eventually get to the point where you're doing a front lever. Now there are certain skills that once you have achieved the ability, then you've kind of run out of ways to progressively overload them without adding weight. But that gets to the next point. You can add weight to virtually all calisthenics exercises to help progressive overload. He's talking about training principles, and he says that you don't use progressive overload in calisthenics. That's entirely wrong. It doesn't matter if you're training with bodyweight exercises or with weights. You are always going to be working with progressive overload. Otherwise, you're not improving. So if your goal is hypertrophy, you would need to add weight. You would need to change the angle that you're working at. And that's where calisthenics has more options. One of the ways that you progressive overload in calisthenics is by changing the lever angle. Now, you don't do this too often with traditional weight training because it's easier just to add weight. If you're on a bench press, you just add more weight. Whereas if you're doing push-ups, you can add weight. You can put a plate on your back and add weight to your push-up. The other way you could do it is by changing the angle that you're doing your pushing, and that will work different parts of your chest, and it'll make it harder and easier depending on which way you go. That is how you progressively overload for pure bodyweight exercises. You can also progress to harder variations of the exercise. So for example, let's say you're working towards a planche. Nobody is going to walk into a gym and be able to do a planche on the first day. But they might be able to do a planche lean to some angle. Now, when you progressively overload, you're going to increase the lean further and further. You might actually progress the planche lean far enough where you could do pseudo planche push-ups, which will help build your shoulder strength so that you could eventually actually do a tuck planche. As you consistently, are able to do the tuck planche, then you can start doing the advanced tuck planche or the straddle planche, and eventually you'll get to the full planche. All that is dealing with progressive overload. You're changing the angle and the lever arm of the workout to make it harder. Once you've reached kind of the high-end goals, like things like planche and 90-degree handstand push-ups and muscle-ups and front lever, back lever, these are kind of the pinnacles. It becomes harder to progressively overload because you don't have any more ways to change the lever arm. That's when you have to get into the next way that you can progressively overload with calisthenics, which is adding weight. When you add weight, it's just like you're doing traditional bodybuilding or powerlifting exercises. You're adding weight. So then you can add more weight as you get stronger and can continue to progressively overload. So the point about not using progressive overload in calisthenics is entirely wrong. It doesn't matter what kind of training you're doing, you're always going to be using progressive overload. So moving on to his next section. What develops a bigger physique, calisthenics or bodybuilding? After I read through the section above, you'll know and understand that bodybuilders' prime focus is on continuously growing their muscles larger and larger over time. On the other hand, those who practice the art of calisthenics usually develop great physiques, but this is not usually the main goal. More so, extreme physical strength and maneuverability is. Depends, but that's really a personal goal. Obviously, with calisthenics, you're working on skills. With bodybuilding, you're working on straight strength. But well, this paragraph above pretty much answers the question. Let's go into more detail on why bodybuilding usually develops bigger physique. Firstly, as mentioned above, bodybuilders can usually focus on progressive overload. Again, I've already gone over that. Training principle that will never usually get used in calisthenics. Again, that's also wrong. In addition, since bodybuilding movements involve plenty of additional resistance, there is more overall chance of breaking the muscle down. That's not true at all either, for the same reasons. Again, if your body cannot tell the difference between you doing a weighted push-up and you doing a bench press. It's the same movement. So if you put the same amount of resistance on your back and do a push-up, your body doesn't care. You're still pushing. Well, this may sound bad. Breaking down the muscle during training is exactly what the bodybuilder wants, to allow the muscle to grow when it repairs, which is true. Hitting the wall So he doesn't really answer the question here. Develops a bigger physique. So I'll answer this. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to limit here when you are discussing this to purely natural lifters. And the reason for that is because when you get into enhanced development, it's a different story because calisthenics become harder when you're packing on weight. If you are looking to add lean muscle, and usually very dense muscle because you're holding a lot of time under tension, calisthenics is going to give you a better looking physique because you're not going to be going through a bulking and cutting phase. You're going to be doing kind of a main gain type thing because you don't want your weight to shoot way up because it's very difficult to do a lot of calisthenics exercises when you got a lot of fat on you. So you're going to look leaner more often as a calisthenics practitioner than you are if you are going in and doing traditional body weight and going through the traditional bulk cut cycles. If you're doing a main gain while lifting, then you don't run into that problem either. And you can, again, at that point, it doesn't matter. It's really, at that point, it's not a matter of the training, it's more about of the traditional habits in both aspects. But again, you're not going to be going through a bulking and cutting cycle ever in calisthenics because if you put on too much weight, it's going to be too difficult to do the exercises that you're used to doing. So if you're able to do a planche and you pack on 20 pounds of fat, it's going to be very difficult to do the planche. So typically you're going to be leaner while you're training as when you're doing calisthenics than you are if you're doing traditional bodybuilding and you are going through a bulking and cutting cycle. So which develops a bigger physique? When dealing with non-enhanced training, it doesn't matter. Your body cannot tell the difference in the type of training. You are keeping time under tension and you're using progressive overload, so your body is going to continuously build muscle, and it doesn't matter if you're doing bench press or doing a whole bunch of variations of push-ups, you're still pushing, you're still building your chest muscles. Alright, hitting the wall as a bodybuilder. Perhaps one of the biggest reasons bodybuilders develop more muscle than someone who does calisthenics is calisthenics always have you hitting the wall quicker. Again, wrong. If you are progressively overloading, you are not hitting a wall. You're always progressing to the next level. And even once you're able to do, say, a planche, you can always add weight. You can put weight on your ankles and make it even harder. In bodybuilding terms, hitting the wall refers to the stage where your muscles have become extremely resistant to the weight load and intensity of your exercises. This inevitable process can cause you to stunt your muscle gain. In other words, when you reach a plateau. And when you reach a plateau, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are stuck. Obviously it means you're stuck temporarily. You have to change things up to progress to the next level. So again, if you're stuck doing, let's say, a tuck planche, you might be at a plateau where you can't quite reach the advanced tuck, but there are other things that you can do to help reach that goal and help you progress. You have to change up your workout so that your body doesn't just get used to it and stop. It's the same thing with bodybuilding. If you are, bench pressing 225 and you're having a hard time progressing to 230, 235, you got to change it up. Change up the angle, maybe work on some incline and decline for a while and then come back to it. You get the old Einstein definition of insanity if you're doing the same thing expecting different results. If you hit a plateau and you're not able to move forward, you change it up. This doesn't matter if it's bodybuilding or calisthenics. Both have the same thing. When you hit a plateau, you change it up so you can get around the plateau. For those who do calisthenics, this usually mean they will not grow anymore as they typically cannot overcome this wall. Again, you change it up, you get past the plateau, and they provide little to no weight load intensity. Conclusion: bodybuilding allows the process of muscle growth to continue for much longer than calisthenics may offer. If you are doing pure calisthenics, yes, you will run into a place where your body weight is no longer enough for you to grow muscle. However, there's no reason to not add weight with calisthenics. Weighted calisthenics is a thing, and it's just as good of a workout. You continue doing the same exercises and making it harder. Win-win. The main difference that you're going to run into with traditional bodybuilding exercises, squats, deadlifts, bench press, etc., is the progressive overload method is easier. You just add weight. Whereas calisthenics, you have more options and you have to be more creative with some of your options if you don't want to add weight, or if you're not ready to add weight yet. For example, it doesn't make much sense to add weight when you're trying to advance from a tuck planche to an advanced tuck planche, or from a straddle planche to a full planche. It doesn't make a lot of sense to add weight. You have to find another way to help you cross that plateau. And typically it's working on your weak spots, identifying, typically it's going to be your shoulder muscles in that particular case. So you have to find ways to work your shoulders to help you progress to the next level in the exercise, which again gives you more options than bodybuilding, not less. So let's see his conclusion. After a thorough read of this article, you should now possess a much deeper understanding of both bodybuilding and calisthenics in terms of muscle gain. He had a lot of information that's wrong. As we know, calisthenics can indeed develop a great physique. Not only can this training method develop and maintain a great physique, but it also provide very strong strength foundation, as some movements and static holds can be very tough to master. This is very true. However, since the main goal of calisthenics is not to grow, again, that has nothing to do with the goal of calisthenics. Calisthenics is a group of exercises that typically involve your body weight. Calisthenics can only get you so far. Not true. To continuously and consistently grow your muscles, additional stimulus and intensity must be applied, just like it is with traditional bodybuilding methods. The very difference is why, for muscle gain, bodybuilding is far more effective to train than calisthenics. Again, wrong. When you go into the gym, guarantee you'll see a bodybuilder doing lat pull downs. And they'll probably be pulling a good portion of the stack, if not the whole stack, when they do it. Is that exercise better or worse than if they went over and started doing pull-ups? Now, if they're doing a lat pull down with 200 pounds and they weigh 240 or 250, then it might be a lot harder for them to do a pull-up because they'll be pulling more weight. In other words, the pull-up is the more difficult exercise depending on your weight. Now, if they only weigh 180 and they're pulling down on the lat pull down 200, and they go over to pull-up, they could add 20 pounds to achieve the same intensity. Then it's effectively the same exercise. Only they're being forced to engage their core more because they need to stabilize their whole body. If they add 45 pounds, now again, the pull-up becomes harder than the lat pull-down. So your body can't tell the difference in the type of stimuli you're giving it. It only cares that it's being stimulated and how difficult that exercise is. That's what you care about. So I'm going to come through and give my analysis now. Can you be a bodybuilder doing calisthenics? Keep in mind that when I talk calisthenics here, I'm also including weighted calisthenics. To answer his question, can you be a bodybuilder doing only calisthenics? And I'm going to include weighted calisthenics in that because it's the same exercises. You're just adding additional stimuli to progressive overload, which he says you don't do, which is wrong. Like I said, yes and no. It's going to depend on what type of bodybuilder you want to be. Now, if you want to be an IFBB pro, in pretty much any of their divisions, because the classic physique and men's physique divisions have kind of gone haywire with what they expect in terms of size, it's going to be very difficult because you're going to also have to use some enhancements to get there. And this is where bodybuilding has a bit of an easier time because in traditional weight training, it's a lot easier to just add weight than it is to figure out how you're going to modify your exercise to get to the next progression. And you're trying to do it quickly because that's why you're using enhancements. You're pretty much going to have to start doing some weightlifting exercise at some point. So you're likely going to have to switch from doing your push-ups, even weighted push-ups, to doing bench press because you're going to be doing it so fast. It's going to be harder and harder to put more weight, more plates on top of your back to do weighted push-ups and reach your progressive overload as you are taking the benefit of enhancements. Same with classic physique has gotten kind of in the similar market. It's going to be very difficult to reach that using calisthenics because pretty much all of these weight classes or divisions in the IFBB are going to require you to use some enhancements to even get on stage in a lot of them. you're and the enhancements are effectively going to require you to progressively overload much faster than you would be otherwise, then it's generally going to be easier to use traditional weight training just because it's a lot easier to just add weight. However, this is not the only form of bodybuilding there is. There is also the natural bodybuilding, which actually has drug tests. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole thing about there people getting around the drug test and whatnot. But if you look at these guys in the natural men's physique, you see these guys they're in good shape. They all look amazing, but they don't look the same way as IFBB pros. These are guys that are achievable. You might even see some of these guys looking like this in your gym. This is the men's physique. Then you have the classic physique. These guys are a little bit bigger, but not super huge. And then you've got their bodybuilding ones, which again are a little bit bigger. These are the guys that are probably going to be weighing around 210 to 220. And they're a little on the leaner side. But again, you compare these guys to, say, like Chris Bumstead or Ronnie Coleman, and they look tiny. Yeah, they all look big on the stage right here, but they're nowhere near as big as the guys in the IFBB stage because these guys presumably aren't taking enhancements. All right, so this is Austin Dunham. One of his things he's known for is calisthenics. He works out and does a lot of calisthenics exercises, and that's actually how he got his channel. As you can see, this is his body. This is him on vacation. So he's not even trying to get to a show. This is what he looks like when he's on vacation. He hasn't really trained much in a few days, and they're getting ready to go swimming with the girl he went on a trip with to Mexico. As you can see, he's got a nice physique. You can see his abs. He's not even flexing them right now. They're just kind of there. He's got good traps, well-defined chest, solid arm size. Could he compete in the natural, say, men's physique? Yeah, he could easily, go into training, just doing his weighted calisthenics training for, 1 or 2 weeks. Maybe diet down to get a little leaner, and he would be ready to step on stage for a natural competition. Would he? He's about 180 pounds. You compare that to. All right, so here you have Anthony Mantello. He weighs about the same as Austin Dunham. They're both about 180 pounds. About the same height. Austin Dunham, I think, might be a little, like a half inch taller, but roughly the same height, the same weight. Now, he is actually training for a show. So this is a couple photos a few days before he's actually getting ready to step on stage for an amateur show. Yeah, he's a lot leaner, he's a lot shredded, but he's also training for a show. Again, you compare that to Austin. Yeah, I'm going to pull up his thumbnail. The thumbnail looks... This is Austin not training for a show, looking striking distance of where Anthony is training for a show. So could Austin get there with diet and focus training specifically for the show? Yeah, and he could do it using just calisthenics. As you can see, Anthony, when he's training for a show, he's got more cuts, he's leaner. But again, the cuts here you see here are largely due to his diet. He's been cutting down from, I think he said he was up around 195 when he started. And he's cutting down to right around 180. So he cut down to where Austin is naturally. And he's probably sitting around, probably around 10% body fat, maybe a little lower. And Austin is just cruising at around 13 to 14% body fat. So you take Austin here, you put him on a diet for 8 weeks and have him continue his normal training schedule, and he's going to be able to compete with that, despite the fact that they have two very different training methods. Anthony is doing traditional weightlifting. Austin does a lot of calisthenics, specifically weighted calisthenics. He's gotten to the point now where, as you can see with his back, he does a lot of weighted pull-ups. Getting back to the conclusion here, can you be a bodybuilder doing calisthenics only? The answer is yes, kind of. What I mean by that is, if you want to be an IFBB pro, no, you're not likely to go in and get your pro card, but you're also not likely to get your pro card doing weightlifting unless you are getting some extra help. If you want to do natural, yeah, you can. It takes hard work and focused, and always focusing on progressive overload. But that's the same as if you're weight training. So it doesn't really matter what type of training you're doing as long as you are consistently going harder than last time, to borrow Coach Greg Doucette's line there. And it doesn't matter what type of training you're doing, that is the method that you're trying to build strength with. And if you're trying to get to focus on hypertrophy, you have to continuously train a little harder. With calisthenics, that might mean changing the angle, that might mean adding weight, that might mean doing a couple extra sets. With weightlifting, that typically means adding more weight. The correct conclusion is, yes, you can, but it's going to depend on what type of bodybuilder you want to be. Either way, you're going to have to focus on progressive overload and make sure that you're focusing on hypertrophy, which means you're going to have to pay attention to your rep ranges, and you're going to have to pay attention to your intensity, and always make sure that you're going a little more intense than you did last time. With calisthenics, you have more options, so you have to be more thoughtful about what you're doing. With weight training, it's just add weight. Ending it here today. If you enjoyed the content, hit the like, subscribe button, and let me know how it goes. And I'll keep you guys updated on this. So far, so good.